Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Down the Wrestling Rabbit Hole here on the Lariat Podcast Network. Guess I said that correctly. It's not, I still call it a Lariat. It is officially the Lariat Podcast Network. Unless we weren't supposed to say that yet, then we might be in a whole lot of trouble. I might be in a whole lot of trouble because my co-host, the original chick magnet, Mozart Fontaine, has not said anything yet. But Mozart, welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
I'm good. I was going to ask, can I still call it a Lariat? Is that
We
still a
can
thing?
still call it a Lariat. What we can't do is we can't say I still call it a clothesline network. That is unacceptable.
No.
We cannot say that here on this network.
It was like a Lariat in Texas, and everywhere else it was like a clothesline. You know?
So
I don't know.
before
I'm just making that
we
up.
dive however deep we're going to go into this rabbit hole, I want to throw a couple of drop some historical knowledge on you, Mozart, as I like to do from time to time.
All right, yeah, hit me with it because I'll get it wrong like I always do.
December 9th, 1965.
December 9th, 1965.
It's a tradition. It's become a Christmas tradition now, if you will, because I'm sure.
Was it Rudolph? The first time Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?
No, but you're kind of in the ballpark. It was the premiere of A Charlie Brown Christmas.
Really?
In 1965.
I didn't even think of Charlie Brown. Wow, that's cool.
So this one might be right up your alley. New Haven Arena in New Haven, Connecticut, 1967.
New Haven Arena. Who played there in 67?
If I give that person away, I'm giving away what happened.
I don't know. That was before I was born.
Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison played at the New Haven Arena in Connecticut, and he was arrested
I didn't know that.
For disturbing the peace during his performance.
Get out.
Yes, and it was the first time that a rock star was arrested, literally,
no way.
Mid performance. And
what did he do? I don't know this.
It doesn't give a detail. It just says that he was arrested for disturbing the peace. This one is right in our backyard, Mozart, but 1974.
All right, I was 2.
December 9th, 1974.
All right.
This is right in our wheelhouse.
Oh, wait. You're not going to tell me where? I thought you said it was right in our backyard.
Well, it's in our wheelhouse. It happened in Tokyo.
It happened in Tokyo?
Yes. But it's what we do best of pretty much everything, even better than the nonsense we do.
Better than the nonsense we do?
It's really why we're here tonight.
Was there an NWA World Titles change?
Jack Briscoe beats Giant Baba to win the NWA World Heavyweight title.
I didn't even know. That's awesome. So Briscoe beats Baba. Okay.
Briscoe beats Baba.
That happened
in Japan.
Wow.
Hey, let me
That's back when the NWA was a powerhouse.
I'm going to do this.
I'd like to see them beat
real first. Hold on 1 second.
That's all right.
I'm sorry. I have one more December date. December 9th, 2017. Kind of a somber day in the world of professional wrestling.
December 9th.
December 9th, 2017.
2017. God, I don't know.
We lost Tom Zenk.
Wow. I didn't even realize it's been that long ago. Well,
2017.
not that long, but still, I guess it is.
59 years old. Passed away.
You know what, though? For me, this is sad because it's happened so many times I got in 99, so say 20, 25, 26 years. I can't keep track of the guys who are living and dead anymore. That's how many have passed. Whether I knew them personally or guys that I, idolized or just knew of. I mean, it's got to be in the hundreds easily.
Oh, I'm sure. And not to sound mean or like I'm undermining anything, not counting not only the mainstream stars that we lost, but all the independent guys and girls that we lost that really some of us have never heard of.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no slight to that particular town. It's just, we haven't heard of them. that we lose, and it seems like, that and at one point in time, it was really at like an alarming rate where it was like making like mainstream
Yeah. Well,
media.
there's been some, accidents and things like that. There's
Yes.
been, unfortunately, some, some drug addiction, some drug abuse, some things like that. There's been crime, there's been all
Yeah.
kinds of things that have been the cause of people passing. It's, wrestling is a shady business, Howard. It's kind of like the mafia in a way, you know what I mean? Like there's a loyalty and there's a code, but there's also that really dark side of it that I was fortunate enough and lucky enough to come up under guys that, didn't preach that type of thing and, kept it clean and kept you out of that. I mean, we just had a guest, what was it, a few weeks ago on the VOC Nation, uh, that was talking about some nefarious stuff going on with
Yes.
some of the trafficking and things like that. Like that's not new in wrestling. Like there's more accusations I saw today towards some executives from female stars, and I can never see stuff like that and think, well, they're making that up, because I know firsthand most likely they're not. Can't say definitively. I mean, you got to put it in front of you. You got to look at the evidence. You have to have everybody's version of it, but it's not unheard of. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's why we have a court system,
Right.
But, it's funny because that can be worked too, because what do we try to do? You try to get the right jury in the right town, So I always say, like, wrestling's probably more real than the rest of the world is. It's probably more real than what we see in front of us every day,
It was funny.
Even though,
I just saw a meme today that talked about,
well, it must have been true.
well, yeah, of course. Well, it was comparing LeBron James scoring 10 points or more consecutive game streak, which, I'll save my opinion for LeBron James. And it asked what was greater, LeBron James's 1,300 10-point consecutive or 10-point games or whatever it is, or the Undertaker streak. And one of the first comments, this is why the internet always wins, was it's not fair. It's not fair to compare a scripted, well-run, well-organized sport to the Undertaker streak.
Exactly. They're probably, I've heard some things I've told you offline. I mean, I've had some confirmations, particularly from the NBA through a friend of mine, that's probably not all that inaccurate. It's probably pretty accurate. That's good. But by the way, though, the streak, that was the worst decision, one of the worst booking decisions, because that's been my latest kick, is there's only one reason to book, and it's to make money.
Right.
That was one of the worst creative decisions that anybody's ever made in the face of the history of wrestling. It was just dumb. It was pointless. It served neither man any purpose. None. There could have been a legacy. Building legacies in wrestling is money.
And it could have been and it still is, but it could have been that streak that really, like we talk about in baseball,
I'll come right out.
Cal
I'll
Ripken's
say
consecutive
it's
game streak
worthless.
can never be broken, but
It's worthless
that
now.
never would have been.
No,
Never.
but what is it worth now? What can you do with that now? Oh, he was 21-0, and by the way, it happened like in the 3/4 through the streak, because he went on and wrestled like a couple of more years.
Yeah.
Useless. That whole, you spent 20 some, I don't know, close to 2 decades doing a streak to decide on a whim. It wasn't on a whim. I'm pretty sure I know what happened, but I'll keep that for the book. Somebody got in somebody's ear at the last minute in the wrong time, and it went awry, and it shouldn't have. It was a stupid. There are wrong decisions in booking, and that was a wrong decision.
Yes.
There's a lot of right ways to do things and a lot of wrong ways to do things, and that was not very cool.
Right.
Because again, it's a factual thing. It's not because I listen, I respect Taker, I like him, but I'm not telling you I was like this Undertaker guy. I don't have those preferences like being in wrestling. I just respect guys for the body of work. But it was a dumb thing to do because you can't market it now.
Right.
I mean, he was very fortunate because he was protective of his character, and he's very smart, that character. Let's rewind that and get that out of there. His persona, his gimmick.
Yes.
He was very protective of his gimmick. So the Undertaker's body of work outshadowed that one loss. But when it comes to the streak in and of itself, that was an angle that played out into a long-term storyline that should have been able to make money on that. Now you can't sell merchandise around the street. You can't, because they ruined it.
Right.
Plain, simple, flat out. It's done.
Right.
That's the lack of foresight in modern wrestling, man.
Right.
You can tell me all day long. They can tell me. They can put it out. Like I told you earlier, man. We were texting. Like I don't need to hear about what that they're this guy's losing, that guy's losing, but he's going to be rewarded later. I don't. Fans don't want to hear that. Fans want to see that stuff play out, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to know. I don't care.
No.
I don't want the spoilers. I want to enjoy the product for the product. And you can't anymore. You say, well, you can stay on social media, but it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's almost impossible. Mainstream.
Listen to this. I'll just say we'll leave names out of them, but there's a couple of guys. One's name begins on an N, the other one's got 3 H's in it, that love to let everybody know what's going on. They're selling the stories now to Sports Illustrated, to TMZ, to the mainstream media outlets. So it's not even just your social media, if you see my air quotes. Mm-hmm. It's everywhere. It's everywhere but the Associated Press, and it'll be there soon, too, if it's not already.
Well, Jim Cornette said that the 3 best ways to spread a rumor or gossip is to tell a phone, tell a friend, and tell a wrestler.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel. That's what those 2 guys are doing. Is we got this thing. Let's run out to everybody. No,
there's a lot of it's ego, and it's also it's ego, number one. But they've convinced themselves that that's how they're making money, because they know they're a media company now. But that's not long-term money. That's short-term. Take the money and run. Now, if there's money to be made, guess who's making it? Them. It's not going to go to the boys. It's not going to go to the undercard, which is part of the boys. It's not going to go to the up-and-comers who are learning things. It's not going to go to the trainers. It's going to go to them. That's what's unfair about it. You're making the quick buck, but that's not being distributed. And that's corporate America, bro. That's where we all work. That's how it works. That's how it's structured. But wrestling became less about the art, less about the actual business of it, more about the corporate bureaucracy of it. It's not about business anymore. It's bureaucracy. That's what most businesses are now. You got a bureaucracy at the top, and everything has to go through them. And you're lucky if something filters down far enough for the worker bees to actually make it accomplished correctly.
Right. But I want to get into our fantasy land, into our rabbit hole.
We're already in it, bro. This is fantasy land.
And I want to kind of set some rules. Not that we'll play by them, because rules are meant to be broken, right? But
and wrestling.
Yeah, and it'll make sense, Mozart, as we kind of peel back this onion of a show. With you can't change the gimmick. The gimmick has to stay the same. You're not, you can't change it. You can't change their persona. Really, we're just switching companies, if you will. And mm-hmm. I'll explain it this way. Let's take early 1985, right? Nikita Koloff is starting to blow up in Jim Crockett Promotions, and this is before. And let's pretend there's no contracts. Because back then there wasn't back then, right? So we're going to kind of go with those rules. We're going to play by 1985 rules. And Nikita Koloff is starting to blow up in Jim Crockett Promotions, right? He's starting to get over as this evil Russian heel. And what if in, let's say, mid-85, Nikita decides, I'm taking my ball and I'm jumping ship and going to WWF. And let's say he just teams up with the Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, because they're the 2 hated guys that are kind of over there. Yeah. Does Nikita, or is Nikita able to play that badass Russian? Does it get over in that crowd in 85 in what we'll call the New York territory? Is he successful?
I always talked about this earlier. There's a couple of names I think that would be successful. You're talking about an era too, so I don't know. Yes. 85, there was a lot of realism going on in the South and in the NWA promotions. it was becoming pretty cartoony in WWF. I don't know about a specific year, specific time, but I think Nikita, once being established, I don't know about maybe right off the bat like that, because he was vicious, he was brutal, he was green, he was hurting people. He admits that. He got very good after a while. After many years of working with some seasoned guys, he became the seasoned guy. But yeah, that big bald-headed monster would have worked anywhere in the world, in my opinion. And again, this is the catalyst is what makes him a bigger star at this point. Well, unfortunately, Vince had already won the battle, but nobody knew it.
Right.
It was still playing out. It was won. The national expansion was done. It was done, but it was still unfolding. You were still on the bridge of events. So if you get a marketing machine behind a guy like that, and he's the biggest heel in wrestling, because he was more legitimate looking in the ring than Nikolai was at the time. Sheik was kind of getting toward the end of his, really prime years. Still looked the part, still had the psychology, but maybe physically wasn't as vicious as he once was. So yeah, I think yeah, you could have had a major star. And one of the caveats too is that, like, when we talked about who could have been a bigger star in which promotion, unfortunately, like I said, at this time, the National Wrestling Alliance, although still a powerhouse, had really all but lost the national expansion at that point. So it doesn't work in reverse.
Right. Well,
Somebody
that's why I
couldn't
went that
come.
way, because it's not going to work in reverse.
Yeah, so
I
somebody
don't think.
couldn't have left, because think about this: WWF pretty much took all the talent that was there. They took NWA guys. That's where they got them from. They're
Right.
homegrown guys, and I could stand, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're homegrown guys at that point were, after Bob Backlund in the main, I don't remember any. They took them from everywhere
Right.
else.
They took them.
Pedro
Right.
Morales was a Northeast guy. He was already out of the picture. Bruno, superstar Billy Graham wasn't even really a Northeast guy. He just hit it big everywhere he went because of the persona.
Right.
So the homegrown Northeast guys as a territory were done. They were poaching everybody. They were taking West Coast guys. They took Roddy Piper out of the Pacific Northwest in the NWA, which was all NWA, but they took him out of Pacific Northwest and Mid-Atlantic. They took, everybody. They eventually got the Fritz and the Von Erichs. They had Bill Watts' guys. You mentioned it, Junkyard Dog. So there's nobody they didn't get that they wanted. And some of them they turned into major stars, and some of them they crapped the bed on, TL Hopper. Great talent, right?
Yeah.
We talked about Terry Taylor. I mean, Terry Taylor should have been a major star, but they chose to play games. So coming the other way doesn't really work as much, because there was nothing for WWF to give to the other. And I'm going to take AWA out of the promotion out of the discussion for this, because they were all but done too. So you're talking now National Wrestling Alliance versus WWF, and then as we move later, it's WCW versus WWF. WWF had all the guys they wanted, so it would have to be guys they didn't already get, like Nikita. What could they have done? What kind of stars would they? Because look at Rick Rude. I mean, Rick Rude went on to be a huge star there.
Right.
You could go on all day long with guys from JYD. I think the Birds. I think the Freebirds, if the right place, right time, and the right mentality, because Vince got them at a time when he wasn't going to control them, and they pretty much were in and right out the door.
Right. Well, what kind of? Now we're talking 85, and and maybe we won't stick it to any era, but I do like
early though, because they had everybody by that point.
Right. I do like Nikita Koloff, especially liked him as a heel.
Yeah.
But what kind of feud? And I'm kind of spitballing here, and here's what I'm going to play out is Nikita comes over and he lines himself up with the Iranian and the other Russian that's from Maryland, right? And from Baltimore, Russia, right? And he's going after Hulk Hogan, right? So you have this big monster Russian going after Hulk Hogan. Does it make sense from a booking standpoint to sell Nikita on his power to pull what they did with Ric Flair a lot, and Nikita gets a non-title match and he beats Hogan? Fair or unfair, it doesn't matter, but he beats Hulk Hogan. Now it's, oh my gosh, Hulk Hogan can be beat, but it's this monster Russian that is coming over here, and they take that story all over the place. Maybe Hulk Hogan is hurt and he's out for a month or something.
Mm.
Selling. Not that anybody would know what that is today, but he's selling a neck injury, back injury, or something, right? It would actually have to be the neck because it would be the Russian sickle, right? So Hogan's neck is hurt. And Nikita gets a one-off victory, disqualification, or some kind of illegal pin. I shouldn't say illegal pin, but a wonky pin, or Hogan gets counted out. Does that Hogan, Nikita rivalry draw money, not just from the Hulk Hogan standpoint, but from a viewership standpoint? Is that two people that you could watch wrestle 4 or 5 times before they have their blow off?
Yeah, I think that if it's me, and I'm trying to think of any real circumstance, I don't think it works for a great babyface champion to lose a non-title bout either. I think the heel can lose a non-title bout because
Okay.
then it's like, okay, that babyface has a shot now. Flair, they did that with Flair a lot. Like
Right. Well, that's what
Brad
made me think of it,
Armstrong,
was they always
Barry,
did it
they
with
would all
Flair.
pin him in non-title, but I think it only works when you're a heel, and here's why. If you have a babyface get pinned, babyface should never be crying about anything. The heel's like, oh, but it wasn't on the line. It doesn't matter. Screw you. I believe. There's nothing. If the babyface loses, he's got to admit that he lost.
Okay.
And if he doesn't, then you get the bullshit that you have today where you're tweening and you're dividing the crowd. He has to always be righteous. He would only, and Hulk Hogan in that era would never be like, brother, he slipped one by me. No, it would have been like, I think the way to book that, I think off the top of my head, is Hulk maybe gets counted out. Maybe. I don't even
Okay.
know if I'd go that far. That's the most I would do on a loss for a babyface champion of that stature. I doubt I would even do that. You can't really do a tag situation where he gets pinned in a tag match. How many times did Flair get pinned in the tag match too?
Right.
Well, the title wasn't on the line. He had an off
Right.
night. Won't have an off night when that title's on the line. Now, again, that's a very heel philosophy.
Okay.
And there's no two ways about that. And that's where modern wrestling has fucked that up. Bad. I said fucked. Bad. The F
Bad.
word. Censor me.
And
Don't demonetize us, but censor me.
And two D's on the bad, because that's how bad it is.
Yeah, 2 D's, just like 2 T's in Freak Nasty. If you knew my boy Freak Nasty, it's 2 D's. I'll put 3 D's on it because there is this whole subscription now of, we'll let the crowd decide. You let the crowd decide initially. They don't get to decide or play against each other because they become the focal point. Takes all the heat, all the pop off the wrestler, whether you face or baby face. Now it becomes about the crowd fighting each other. It's not fun. It does hijack shows. It does take away from what most of the fans want to watch and see. So when a wrestler incites that with themselves or divides an audience, think about it like this. If you divide an audience politically in all the taboos, you divide them in religion, you divide them in the workplace, you divide them in politics. When you want their votes, you've screwed yourself. You have to now, again, you can divide the crowd if you want them to turn on each other and you want to take over. Like governments have done that since the beginning of time. In wrestling, it doesn't work because you need the majority of that crowd. They can like the heel all day long, but they should really want to see the heel lose. When you see a good movie and you want that villain to get his comeuppance because he's a dick. Now, can they switch it around? Can they write him into a babyface? Sure, he can make the turn, but when he's the villain, he shouldn't be cool. He shouldn't be cheered for. There's an argument to be made, well, he's got to sell merchandise too. Okay, yeah, but you still can. Doesn't change anything. I've seen it on the independents tons of times. Great heels that won't let the crowd get behind them. Now, after the show, shake a hand, sign an autograph. You're going to be professional. You're going to make people But when they're buying into that persona in the ring, the last thing that you want as a heel is for somebody to think you're great. So if Nikita comes in your example and he pins Hogan clean in the middle of the ring, a big portion of that crowd's going to buy into him now. You
Okay.
don't want that.
Okay.
They just will. It's human nature. So it's the wrestler's job as psychological masters to say, no, you're not buying into that. That's why I disagree with the whole John Cena, where John would purposely, and he's proud of it. He's on his tour. Oh yeah, I was polarizing. It doesn't draw money. It didn't for him. He was in WWE with their marketing machine, dude. You could go in there and crap your pants, and if they wanted that over, they could sell that to somebody. Marketing. From a grassroots perspective, it doesn't work psychologically. It just doesn't.
Okay.
It's been proven many, many times. So what I think you would do in that case, back to now I'm off my soapbox. Yeah, Steve, we need a soapbox graphic. I think the way that you do that, because I love that feud. I don't think Hogan loses. I think that, first of all, you're doing what they did back then, and you're feeding anybody and everybody to say Nikita. So he's winning over some key baby faces that can afford that loss. He's beating some top talent. He's probably doing some enhancement stuff in that era. He's probably beating a bunch of guys from local guys, as we might say today. He's probably beat down Hulk Hogan. He's probably slid in the ring and put the beat down on him and put an injury on him. So there's so much for the babyface to come back from that once they get to the match. And if you want this to play out over a period of time, there's a couple of ways to do it, right? So you could just have him get to that point, lose the big match, and there's a blow off, and you got to kind of get him hot again. Or maybe he does beat him by count out, and you can go to the next match, then maybe there's a disqualification of some type. You could do these type of things to keep the feud going, but he can never get a clean victory over a pure babyface. Not even in today's era, it doesn't work, and especially not then. You know what I mean? Like, he could
Right.
have been a vicious, because think about what they did. They were feeding Bundy, Orndorff, Piper. There was a whole slew of guys lined up for Hulkster to run through. And he didn't run through them like they were nothing. Everybody was a challenge. Like, oh my God, how's he going to beat Mr. Wonderful?
Yeah.
Well, now you get this Animal Kamala coming after him. What is he going to do? That's the money, man. That's why that era built they say Hulk built the house that we all live in, right?
Right.
Hulk built the house. That whole era, and that wasn't new booking back then. It was just done on a really national level, so the whole nation at one time gets to see it. It was revolutionary in that way, because everybody at one time is seeing that, and you're not seeing it at your local venue or your local TV, right? Does that make
Right.
sense? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. No. And
What do I
I
know?
get right. And it's funny, you said that, about Hulk Hogan building the house, because I heard a very wise man say, and I'm probably going to butcher how he said it, but a very
Is
wise
it going to be
man
like how you
said,
butchered that roast beef?
yeah, exactly, just exactly along those lines. And hopefully I don't choke on getting this out. But
Don't joke.
a very wise man said that the house was built with Hulk Hogan bricks or something along those lines. Um, is what it was said, and that's very much true, especially in the mid '80s.
Yeah,
The house was definitely built with Hulk Hogan bricks. Can't argue that. I mean, it's there. Any show that Hulk Hogan was on, if you were on it, I would assume you would make more money because there was more money to go around. But who else, in your opinion, could, again, not changing the gimmick or the persona, who could have, I don't know, maybe been bigger, or maybe opened up their gimmick a little more, their persona a little more, had they jumped one way or the other. But it always seems to make sense, because Vince did win the war, and he did take this thing global to go NWA, Mid South, WCW, whatever, to the WWF. But if it works in the other direction, I mean, I'd love to hear it. And again, if it makes because this is going to air in a couple of days, if you're listening to this and I'm completely off and it works in the other direction, leave it in the comments so we can kind of look at it and say, oh yeah, well, that does work. But Mozart, who do you think jumps ship and goes from A to B and, would probably potentially have the potential to become a bigger star?
Well, I want to say a caveat too. I was just thinking while you were talking, something you said triggered me. Maybe it was the Hulk Hogan.
Everything I say triggers you. I do it all day long.
I know, for real. No, this is triggered in a good way. Not having me watch bad footwork and nonsense. I think if because I said you can't have a babyface like that lose. He can't lose clean, and it's very risky to even have him lose at all. So if the booker decides that, hey, I think we could really make that work, it's got to be really, really, really shady, right? Because,
Right.
and I don't know that it worked with Hulk in general. Like, it worked in the more maybe reality based feuds of the South in the NWA, where Nikita had some clean wins over Magnum, and you really it was also best of 7, and you were really trying to set Magnum up to kind of be the underdog to come back, which is what he was great at too. One of the things he was great at. But I think if you are going to go that route and somebody makes the argument, well, yeah, no, you're wrong, Mozart. He could lose. Then he has to. It's not even an argument. There has to be some real chicanery. You need a manager. You need a second. You need somebody to call blatantly, no questions asked, calls that loss. Because if he loses clean, he took all his steam away. He's not the unstoppable babyface champion. Even if it's not Hulk, it just doesn't work when you're that really gung-ho babyface champion. Like, if he's taking losses, he's got nothing to complain about. And again, that's a risky thing to do, even if you're using interference, because he's not going to come out and say, well, Howard, I'm the great, I'm the people, I'm of the people, and the people are behind me, and especially that type of, specifically to say your prayers, follow me, brother, type of thing. He can't make excuses, and he would have to if that happens. Well, it took 2 of them, brother. Like, it's still kind of making an excuse. So me as the booker, I'd say no way, no way, no way. You know what I mean? But that's the caveat. If you're going to do it, you got to be really, really crafty about how you do it. And it's going to take a blatant, hey, Uncle Ivan ran in from the back and just used the Russian chain and jumped out and watched him, now he gets that non-title victory, which gains him the title match. It could work, but I don't think it's the best way. That's my caveat. So back to your question.
Yeah, who would have prospered more, I guess, or who would have potentially become a bigger star if they left where they were and jumped ship at any time? It doesn't have to be 85. It could be in the 90s.
I think we got to look at it in the context. WWF was clearly making the bigger stars,
yes,
like they just were. Unless you were Dusty or Flair, and even arguably they were the only 2 that could probably have the same type of name value outside of the NWA. Because remember Harley, the great Harley race. One of my heroes went by that point. Savage was already there. Steamboat was there. So outside of Dusty and Flair, they had about everybody they wanted. Magnum was already in the car accident. They ended up with Kerry Von Erich. So anybody that looked the part, that could draw money on any other, there wasn't many people they didn't get. And I probably am missing a few, but I think when you talk about the magnitude of who the stars were, it was only Dusty and Flair that could rival. And they both ended up there at some point anyway. So the guys that didn't go there that come to mind were Sting.
Right.
What about Sting? Now, again,
I'm not talking about the Sting that came over after the buyout. I'm talking
talking about Sting.
Surfer hair Sting.
The Sting that carried WCW when they withdrew from the NWA. When Mid-Atlantic withdrew and they became World Championship Wrestling and rebranded themselves, Sting carried the company for several years as the premier babyface. The other guy that I think is an interesting pick because he went back and forth between heel and face time to time, but had a mystique like not many others did, was the Great Muta. So, you talk about how, Hakushi was a really good draw for WWF, but he didn't have, Gensai didn't have the um, mystique and the aura that the Great Muta had. To see him come over in full paint, bigger production, probably, the ring entrance gear that he ended up in IWGP late years later with all the cool ring gear, ring entrance, the ninja stuff, the samurai looking get up. That they could have put the marketing machine behind him, and he was also very adept at working the Western style like Hakushi was. So he could fly around, he could wrestle on the mat, he could wrestle a lot of different types of guys. I mean, uh, anybody who might be raising an eyebrow at that, watch him wrestle Barry Windham,
Right.
which Barry could do that too. So you had two guys that could wrestle anybody, but um, he wasn't a guy who, although he was very, very rooted in the Japanese style, that could only wrestle other Japanese dudes.
Right.
I think unfortunately that happens a lot today, a lot more than people will admit. They,
So,
but he putting him, Nikita, I think, and Sting obviously as a baby face. It changes a lot of things because at that point, going into the 90s, Hogan, they had lost Hogan at one point, well, they lost Hogan for a while. Sting could have changed that game. Would there have been a Michaels Bret Hart if Sting was there and Sting was the guy? They could have changed a lot, you know. Muda could have just been that really huge. He obviously would have needed a mouthpiece, but I mean, let's talk about some of the talent that they had at the time. They had Jim Cornette floating in and out at the time. They had plenty of guys. I think Bobby Heenan was still there at that point, or could have been, depending on the time. When to put him with a guy who could talk like one of those two, much like Gary Hart was, or even Gary Hart himself. If Gary Hart came as part of the package, wow. I mean, I could see that being a real big coup.
absolutely. And I was just handed this, and I'm being told that we actually have an official rule sheet, Mozart, that they dug up in our archives somewhere. In the 10 or 12 weeks that this show's been alive, yes, we have archives. Um, the rule sheet is they must remain in their original era. So we're going to take like 90 or 92, whatever year Sting that is.
Well,
Whether a
they
wrestler,
would all been around that time.
right,
Mm-hmm.
the wrestler, manager, or personality must only be used within their time period they were active. So we
Yeah.
can't take 92 Sting and revert him back to 85 or whatever. Again,
No, that's why I said 85
yeah.
was too early for Nikita. It would have had to have been long after his baby face turn, you know. It would have had to have been, he probably would have went as a baby face too, but they could have really made a great heel with him, especially when he went back to the shaved head and things. Now
I didn't
again,
like I
taking
didn't
out.
like Nikita with hair. He just looked goofy. I didn't
Yeah,
like.
it was probably playing a little bit off of the Drago thing from Rocky,
Yeah.
4 from years earlier, because
Well,
he
wasn't
had.
there rumors that he was going to be Drago?
Oh, I don't know, I never
I
heard that,
yeah.
but
I hold. You keep talking.
Stallone's a
I'm
huge
gonna.
wrestling fan, so I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, I never heard that, but that'd been interesting. But I think I don't know the reason. I'm just guessing because it was kind of like, okay, we got to change his look because now he's a baby face. Now there is no Soviet Union. Now it's just Russia. So now he's not from now he's from Lithuania, Russia. There was no Soviet Union anymore. There was no the Communist Party per se had fallen apart. Well, it did in real life. So they were they were trying to mirror real life with where what his gimmick was. So yeah, you take because look at Muda was in the early '90s, and Sting. I'm thinking if Sting had gone in that era when he was red hot, once he had if they could have got a coup on him when he was doing the stuff with the Horsemen, or at the same time about the same time that Muda was around. So I
Right.
think
So
taking those three guys at that point, because again, that's when they were really, they'd already won the national expansion by that point. There's no question. So yeah, that's what I would say.
so apparently, and I don't know where this third guy would fit in because it seems kind of bizarre, but Nikita Koloff was seriously considered for the role of Ivan Drago in Rocky IV,
Okay.
making it making it to the final casting round with
Oh
Dolph
wow, I didn't know
Lundgren.
that.
With Dolph Lundgren, and take a wild guess at who the third person. It'd be the last person you would think to play Ivan Drago, and it makes absolutely no sense other than his physique made sense. Guess who that third person was? And we just talked about him a couple minutes ago.
Kerry Von Erich.
Kerry Von Erich.
Because of the physique. Kerry had, in my opinion, I mean, if I had to pick a best, it was Kerry's, physique. I mean, people, that's subjective, but to
I
me,
just how does Kerry Von Erich, a boy from Texas, play Ivan Drago
well,
from?
obviously at that point, he's getting his hair cut and he's doing some,
Yeah, it
he's gonna
just
have to do
seems
some
very
things,
weird. Very weird.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I thought I heard about the Nikita Koloff thing a while ago, but I never researched it
he
until
was a
just now.
German, and he was of German descent in Texas. So I mean, why would they
This is
Russian in the
true.
movies?
I forgot about his German roots. Yes, I forgot.
Yeah, which was completely thrown away by that point. That was never even talked about. That Fritz von Erich was in the era, coming off the World War II and was hating the Nazis. By the time Fritz came around, that's why the
Right,
von Erich thing was so over, because he was a Nazi heel. You know,
right. So let's go back to your Sting, um, jumping ship, and let's say he jumps in what, I guess 92. I guess we'll say. Um,
yeah.
how does the landscape? Because obviously now he's jumping from NWA, WCW to
Yeah,
WWF. How does the
it changes
landscape
everything.
change? I mean, I know we talked about possibly no Brett, Sean, um,
Well,
and
considering as a baby face, he carried WCW for a while. He was their flagship guy for a lot of years. So what, 4 or 5 years at minimum. Coming out of the '80s, going into the early '90s, because even at that point, Flair had gone. I think was it '91 or '92? I think Flair was gone for a period of time. Tully and Arn were up north. I mean, they had everybody. That's why
they
this
had
was so
everybody but
compelling,
Sting.
because they had everybody but Sting. And, at that point, remember, they had even floated, Sam Houston had a run there, Brad Armstrong, I think, all these mid card guys that were super talented, mid to upper.
Ron
Uh,
Bass was there.
Ron Bass, I mean, you name it, they were there. The Funks were there for runs. I mean, they had
Rugged Ronnie Garvin was
everybody.
there.
They had Ronnie, every single person. You know who didn't float through there, though, was the Raging Bull. I didn't
Oh,
think of
Manny
Manny
Fernandez, yeah.
Fernandez. Yeah.
Man, you're making producer Steve work tonight with dropping all these names, Mozart. He's gonna be mad at
I
you.
know. Yeah. Should I stop with the names? But
No, let's keep going.
but his NWA World Tag Team partner Rick Rude became a massive
Yes,
star in
yes.
WWF.
But so
You know,
Sting comes along in '92, right? How long is he there? Is he there more than 5 years? And I'm asking this specifically to lead you to something else. Is he there for more than 5 years at a top
well,
tier level?
there's no way to predict that. So let's go. You have to talk about both scenarios. So if they wooed him back to WCW with the big money, because theoretically he goes there and his stock goes up even more and he's a bigger star, well, that sways a lot of things for WCW. Now they already had him once Hogan came in and Bischoff got there, and they were pushing for their 83 weeks in the lead.
Right.
They were making a run for that time period. Um, Not quite there yet, but they were setting the players up to make that leap, to make that run, right? Back in those days, was it 90, 94? So if he stays there, then that opens up a huge door for somebody else, and I don't know who. But what it does change in if he goes back, man, maybe things are. It probably doesn't change much for WCW. It probably just changes things for him in terms of the money he could demand, which who knows, maybe he was already getting it. his stock in terms of what his worth was in the wrestling world, WCW was already in place because they had gotten Hulk, and they were putting together, a team of a roster that was going to be able to kind of rival that WWF roster, and then they were going to start stealing people and poaching them back.
Right.
So I don't think it really changes WCW much. It could, but what it changes, what if he leaves? It keeps WWF in a position where now they're back where they were, where they're elevating Brett and they're elevating Sean, and these are the guys. Because it could have been easily, Sean and Sting going at it.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going is if it progresses, 92, 93, and we stretch this into 97,
Yeah.
Then does November 9th, 1997 would probably not happen, which is the Montreal Screwjob, which I believe is every bit of work. I don't care what people tell you.
Over the years, as I die, we could get into that at some point too. That's a real rabbit hole because I don't believe it. I believe it was a work for a lot of reasons.
Yes.
And if it wasn't a work, it was one of the dumbest things that ever happened in wrestling for even more of a multitude of reasons.
Yeah. So I mean, we don't get that, but then do we get Sting and Sean, or Sting and Brett, or there's a whole multitude of things that open up if if Sting stays for an extended period of time, and along those same lines, you brought up the Great Muta. If him and Sting move at the same time, we get Sting and Muta in WWF instead of, and WCW is I think we still get those matches. Which is
they had a classic run of matches. So think about if Muta had left. I mean, that might change things more for WCW than Sting leaving, because he was involved in a string of matches with everybody. With Steve Austin, with Sting particularly. He was feuding with Barry Windham. He was a top contender for TV title. For the world title. So he was feuding with a lot of guys at that time. He was the heel side of that to keep a lot of their babyface guys running.
Right.
So it. What's funny with him though is because he didn't speak fluent English at the time, and would have probably needed a manager or some piece. He would have been a great heel, but I don't know that he would have been the top guy in WWF. I think it would have just been more of an exposure thing for him and probably a bigger payday.
You're right.
I could be wrong, but I don't really think that. I don't necessarily think that you need to be the greatest talker in the world. That's never really honestly been the case, especially if you have a great mouthpiece with you. But I think that the business was changing at a point where to be at the level that they needed them to be probably would have not, maybe needed to pick up some English or start doing some promos that were a few words. But then again, I don't know. I'm seesawing in my head on that one, because the thing that comes to mind is Bobby Eaton. I mean, Bobby, never cut the most scorching promo, but man, he was an awesome star.
Yeah, and as much as I love Bobby Eaton, everybody knows how much a fan of Bobby Eaton I am.
Well, what if they had gone?
Promos were shit.
What if they had gone there? What if the Midnights had gone? I forgot about them, and they could have changed the tag team scene. I mean, Tully and Arn went, and they wore the world tag titles, and they were a really good team in there. That Smash Mouth style fit in really well. You take the Midnights out of their era when they were on top too, they could have done the same thing up there. Imagine if they took the Midnight and the Rock and Roll there. I didn't even think about the tag scene. I was thinking singles guys.
Well, not only that, even if just the Midnight comes over, does, and depending on when they transition over, do the Rockers stay together a little bit longer? Do we not get Marty trying to jump out the barbershop window because he's afraid of Shawn Michaels. I
Yeah,
mean, does that not
yeah.
happen now? Because
And you
that
gotta, for me in that feud, you gotta have the Midnight Speed heels too, just like
yeah,
the
oh
Rock and
yeah,
Roll.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
they were
especially
way
if they're
better
working
heels
with
than they
with
were baby
Cornette.
faces.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I didn't
They,
like
you know
the
what they were
whole
good at? They were good at they were good at small runs as a babyface in the right situation. You
yes,
know,
and I didn't like
short
the
runs rather.
the Cornette Midnight against the Paul Heyman Midnight. I really couldn't get
That's one of those things that sounds really, really, really good on paper,
on pay. Yes,
but it didn't pan out as well as
it just
it
doesn't
should have.
pan
Yeah.
out.
Um,
And again, individually, I'm fans of everybody involved, but those six together just they they just didn't have it. They didn't. It didn't work for them.
mhm.
In a nutshell. Um, but I'm gonna drop another guy's name on you, but I need to check my facts first. Just to see.
I know.
Hold on.
I'm 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 so not good with the facts. I'm just making stuff up with these. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think I like the Midnights there though. I forgot all about those guys because Rock and Roll. Remember, the Rock and Roll Express did get a little run there later on.
Right.
I mean, what a great
So
match with the Heavenly Bodies for the Smoky Mountain Tag Belts in WWF.
so 19. Let's go 1987. Okay, and I
I
had
don't
to check.
remember what was going.
I had to check where he was in
I
'87
had
to
a
make sure that it
BMX
makes.
bike in 1987. That's all I remember.
But and again, one of my favorite wrestlers that's very, very, very underrated for his body of work. But let's take
Thank you. Oh, you
1987.
weren't talking about me.
Well, not 97. I was 97. Yeah.
I wasn't around in 97 either.
Well, so you started in 99, didn't you?
Yeah.
So
Oh, boy.
1987, Brad Armstrong joins the WWF.
Brad, I think he might. Did he do some work there?
He did
I
late.
think,
That's why I had to check. It was late. It was
yeah.
2000-ish.
I still think they wouldn't have pushed Brad. No, they would have made Brad mid card and here's why, because he's Dolph Ziggler. I mean, Nick is
Yeah.
so good, and he's been told this. He's so good. His job is just always going to be to make everybody else look great. He's going to make the top
But it's
star
not a
look
bad
great.
job to have. Honestly, it's not a bad
No,
job to have. I mean,
no. Look at
what
the
better
longevity
spot?
he got out of it.
Right, right. I mean, listen, the Brooklyn Brawler made a career out of making guys look great, and
And
30 some
truthfully, though,
years or
like I
whatever.
just want to be clear, though, like, and I respect Brawler. My opinion, he's not on Nick and Brad's level, though. Like
No,
they
no,
are
no, no, no.
so
I'm not
good.
saying that.
I
No,
mean,
no,
they are so
not at
good.
all. But
You
you
know,
make a career out of how do I want to put it to you? You make a career out of making careers.
well, no, but
And
they, keep it in context though, because Brawler was an enhancement talent.
yes,
That's his job. That's different.
yes.
That's George South, Bob Cook, legendary guys, legendary talents that were enhancement. Nick Nemeth, Dolph Ziggler, Brad Armstrong were not enhancement talents.
No, no,
Sam
they weren't.
Houston
No.
wasn't an enhancement talent. But what they were the guy that was always going to make the top guy look great.
Right. They were
Right.
going to take
So
that top guy, make him
two different
go from
jobs,
good to
but they
great.
were so good that they had enough star quality that you could put them in a higher place on the card, if you, just for lack of a better word. They had more value, more name value than some of the enhancement guys. That's what I'll say, because placement on the card doesn't really matter, and it hasn't for decades. But they were so good that Brad was always going to be the secondary champion, the mid card title, which the TV champion, the IC champion. They were probably never going to make Brad the guy. I don't think they were going to gamble on Brad like they did with Hitman Bret Hart.
Right.
Because again, he didn't have a persona like Bret Hart had. I mean, Bret Hart was dressed in the pink and black. He was the hitman. He was precise. He was precision. Brad Armstrong was just Brad Armstrong. And you know, that's, not to take away from that, but, he didn't have Road Dogg's charisma, right? He had his
Right,
own type of charisma. He was a great, 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 great babyface. One of the best. He's a wrestler's favorite wrestler.
right.
That was his role. That's a little different than being an enhancement talent, though. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I respect all those guys too. But like let's face it, they weren't going to put the IC title on Brawler, or maybe they did at one point. I don't know. I forget. But he
No, I
wasn't going
don't
to be
think
a
they
guy
did.
that they
No.
were seriously going to put like a major mid card title on. His job was going to be to just make just be enhancement talent. Like he was
Right.
probably not winning much. You know what I mean?
Well,
So
does Brad ever win the Intercontinental title if he's
yeah.
there?
Yeah, Brad's the guy like Mr. Perfect. Although Perfect arguably could have been and probably should have been a world champion, but he was like a Mr. Perfect. He was like DiBiase. He was in that vein of boy could they work,
Hmm.
but maybe they're not the heavyweight champion. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't know that like for me personally, like I'm very comfortable being a utility guy, right? Like I can do anything. Like I think they became legends on being able to be that guy that's just about there, that name value that wouldn't be unrealistic if they wore the world title, but they probably weren't going to be. You know,
Right.
I think I think Brad's a perennial IC champion. By today's standards, when everybody wins the titles 57 times, Brad should have won it a time or two if he would have been at the company at the right place, right time. Because you remember Brad was wearing a lot of regional titles in the NWA, and he was a
He
major on national TV. Now, again, don't for our fans that are maybe a little bit younger, don't confuse me saying national TV with they won the national expansion because Crockett Promotions did have national TV. They had cable TV. So on national TV, he was the guy that could give the heavyweight champion of the world, Ric Flair, a run. And
between
if he
tag
beat Ric
titles and
Flair,
individual titles, he held what I'll call 13 regional titles and
no
titles
doubt,
outside of WCW.
great. Yeah,
13,
no
and
doubt.
then he was the light heavyweight champion for WCW, and he
Yeah,
was one third of the 6-man tag team championship with Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin.
that's right. I remember that. Yeah. Um,
But
Wait,
how about
what was the gimmick? Was it Freebird Fantasia? Was he Fantasia?
let's see what
I might
was
be
no
wrong.
Bad Street, wasn't it?
He was
Bad Street.
was he? I don't know. He was there. I
Yeah, I
can't
think it was. I
remember.
think it was Bad Street.
I thought he said
Um,
okay.
but sticking with Brad in that 87-ish time frame, what if does it change? Um, and if it does, how does it change if they bring over him and Tim Horner as a set because they were a tag team for a little while?
Oh, Tim was another great worker. I think that you got a really good always top contenders for the tag titles, and possibly could have an easy run with the world tag titles.
The Lightning Express, I believe, is who they were.
Lightning, yeah,
Him and
yep,
yeah. White
hmm
Lightning, Tim Horner, and Brad Armstrong.
yeah,
Again,
and
probably two of
they
my
were.
favorites.
Yeah, so they were like for the young guy. If we have any fans watching that want to look those guys up, they were kind of like a precursor to the cruiserweight, light heavyweight style that hit America in the late '80s, early '90s. As a tag team, they might be comparable to what the British Bulldogs were doing on TV, except Davey brought a power element to the British Bulldogs to set them apart. Dynamite also was strong, but Davey brought that power element from a visual perspective. British Bulldogs and the Lightning Express could have had some hell, really good matches.
In fact, they won the UWF
Mm-hmm.
tag team championship. They actually beat looks like two guys that really never went anywhere. They beat a guy named Sting and Rick Steiner
Yep.
To win the UWF tag team championship. And then
Yeah, they
actually
did.
they successfully defended them at the Great American Bash in '87 against Angel of Death. The guys you would have to look that up. Who was it was a great hand in his day. And a guy by the name of Big Bubba Rogers that went on to be the Big Boss Man. Um,
Yeah.
and then they eventually lost those titles to the Sheep Herders, which, people that are marks for WWF know them as the Bushwhackers. But I'm telling you, they are two polar opposite tag teams when you talk
Yeah.
about the Bushwhackers and the Sheep Herders. If you don't believe me, look up Sheep Herders, tag team on YouTube, and then look up a Bushwhackers tag team match, and you will
But look at
clearly
the
see it.
amount of guys in that short bit of history. Look at the amount of guys that went to WWF. That's why it was so hard to be like, well, who was left to really go? I mean,
Yeah,
maybe less than 20 guys that they didn't get. If you include guys like Tim Horner, Brad Armstrong, the Midnights, um, Magnum TA in his prime would have been a huge star there. Although I don't know where that would have gone had Hogan still been on top, right? Because then now you have like top babyface and top, yeah, IC champion easily, you know.
right,
Um, Which again, look, that was his role in the NWA. He was the perennial United States champion for a couple of years,
right.
dropping it to, getting it from, I don't remember if he dropped it to Wahoo. I know he beat Wahoo at one point. And then, that for the young fans, the best of seven wasn't originally Booker T and Chris Benoit. It was Magnum
Yeah,
TA and
no.
Nikita Koloff. Although that one was a really good best of seven too, though, I got to say. Very, very
But
underrated series.
another guy that WWF got late, and maybe if they would have gotten him earlier,
Hmm.
would it have made a difference? I mean, let me look him up. His first run was 95 to 96, and then he had short runs in 97, 98, and 99. But what if around right before the expansion, 83, 84, and then into the expansion, a guy by the name of Buddy Landell shows up in WWF?
Yeah, Buddy was red hot. Man, he was almost right there at the cusp when the Attitude Era busted out. Yeah, Buddy was going to be the guy. Super talented. Um, Who knows? Who can predict history? But he could have been the guy. He could have been their answer to Ric Flair.
Well, that's
Um,
what I was thinking,
he
and
was the
because,
third, the other Nature Boy. Buddy
right,
Landell.
because
So he could have been.
Crockett tried that, and from what I understand, Buddy having his demons and everything, that kind of curtailed that. But that's what they were looking for: Nature Boy versus Nature Boy,
Yeah,
kind of feud. That prompted, Ric Flair's whole, I spent more money on spilt liquor, than you've drank or whatever he said. But that they were building, towards that, and of course, Buddy had other ideas, but yeah, man, right on the cusp of that national expansion with Hogan and all, or right at the beginning of that Attitude Era, if they could have just done something a little differently with him, I think Buddy Landell could have been huge. I mean, I say we all, those of us that are older, more mature. I'll say, I hate saying older, more mature. Um, knew Buddy could work. I mean, when Buddy was
yeah.
on, there was hardly anybody better. Um,
The the
but
the
man, when he
thing
was
that
off,
got a
he was
lot of
off.
these guys were their personal issues, though. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Buddy, he's not the only one. I mean, there's
Right.
many guys that
Oh,
were. I mean, Jake Roberts famously, and now is completely turned his life around. As great as Jake was, what if Jake was even greater? You know what I mean? So
yeah.
there were a lot of guys that had the talent and the. It's not just where today's, you got these ultra athletes that can do 78 flips and they can, fly from here and there, and they're flexible as all get out, and there's better looking physiques over by and large, right, across the
Right.
spectrum. Although, you got the outliers back in the day. There were great physiques like, Ivan Putski. I mean, good. Yeah, I mean, there were, but I think by and large, the majority of the guys are in overall better shape than maybe some of the older wrestlers. But what was unique about that is if you had a beer belly or you looked like Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch, or it didn't mean that you couldn't fight and brawl and even wrestle. Chief Wahoo McDaniel. I always enjoyed Wahoo because he was just tough. didn't look like a bodybuilder. But what I'm saying, my point is that by and large, the guys and girls have better physiques across the board. But what they don't have is a Kerry Von Erich or a Lex Luger physique, right? Because again, those didn't come without a price. But eh, my point is that I forget what my point is now. Just when you talk about people that were great in ring workers and wrestlers and technically proficient, that wasn't always the reason they didn't get to be at the top. Like I said, Brad Armstrong. If it was on technical proficiency, Brad Armstrong would have been the heavyweight champion in every promotion in the world several times
Right.
over.
Yeah.
So it really doesn't have anything to do solely with your technical proficiency. I mean, it's a package, right?
Right.
There's a look involved. There's an aura. There's a way you carry yourself. There's that technical proficiency. There's the body of work that you've created. I mean, it's infinite, the things that matter to different bookers or owners of companies, but depending on what they want to hire a guy for. Or what you're bringing to the table. Jake Roberts brought something way different to the table than Kerry Von Erich was bringing to the table. So yet Honky Tonk Man, who really just understood psychology. I mean, nothing that Honky did was overly complicated. Was gonna be this legendary technical match, but he brought a gimmick to the ring that people despised. So therefore, he drew a lot of money with, and he knew how to make them despise himself. But I will say, a common theme with all these guys we're talking about is nobody polarized the audience. Whatever their role was is what they did, and they made a lot of money doing it at the time. Honky Tonk was not going to play a baby face when he was the heel. $1 Million Man.
Right.
I mean, Ted DiBiase was one of the great baby faces of the day, but you would never know that watching the $1 Million Man persona, would you?
Yeah. No, it's funny it's funny to see him in Mid-South, and then be the $1 Million Man, in WWF, and it's like, wow, that's what a great character, what a great persona. And I think what we've talked about this before on here, or maybe on our other podcast, but Vince McMahon went to incredible lengths to help, perpetuate that persona by giving, Ted DiBiase, he's like, I want you to go into 7-Eleven and buy a pack of gum and pay $100 bill and get the change, just so you could. And Vince gave him the $100 bill to go do it. So it was, furthering that gimmick.
That was stuff, though, that those guys were taught long before Vince. You know what I mean?
Oh, no, yeah. I'm not saying Vince taught him that, but going to the lengths that Vince went to.
But that's what they protected the characters at that point in time. Yeah, they knew how to protect the personas. I mean, I've seen guys take great care in letting the fans not. If they're working an injury, then they walk to the car with crutches, or they walk to the car with their arm in a sling. I mean, that's part of keeping up the illusion, even if somebody might. Because one of the goal now is like, right, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? But what you can do is make somebody question: was that part real? Did he really get hurt when that happened? Wow, you guys really put your body on the line, because they do. And even today they do. Like that's something you can't really take away from people, I'm not a fan of modern booking and scripting everything to the T where you can't breathe otherwise, get to do every little single thing right down to the wire, but because that's not really working. That's, it's, I mean, I don't know. There's a difference to me between working and performing, if you're working, you're out there, you're wrestling, and if things go haywire, then you unhaywire them real quick,
Right. So,
or your body of work isn't going to be remembered.
Right. The next guy I want to bring up, and I don't know why these guys keep popping into my head, but they do. He wrestled in WWE until 82 to 84. He was in WWF. Then he leaves, and He spends some time in a couple other promotions. So I
Mhm.
want to go with like 86, 86 Mid South Eddie Gilbert jumping to WWF.
Yeah, Eddie was a mastermind at being a psychological heel. So Eddie could have been, as big as DiBiase got. There's no real ceiling for that kind of heat, that kind of know-how. Now again, not maybe not having the size they would have been looking for back in those days, um, but it could have worked to his advantage because he was special. He wasn't just going to
Now,
be another normal sized guy working on a card of giants.
right. And what just popped into my head again, I don't know why it just did, but yeah, I have tag team match. It's 1986 WWF, and you have Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Superfly Snuka on one side in Madison Square Garden against, again, 1986 against Roddy Piper and Eddie Gilbert on the other side.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting team. I don't know, because again, it looks good on paper, but does it work
Right.
out? Chemistry.
Like,
That's always that's kind of like the it factor. That's what you're always kind of gambling with, unless because this happens in real life, happened with the chick magnets, unless they had real chemistry outside of the ring and they were really good friends, or they were just really somebody saw a one off match and both teams really gelled really well. You know what I mean?
right.
I don't know that Hulk and anybody is going to be a great tag team because his presence was so overwhelming. Like by the time
Right.
he was late in his career and he did the thing with Edge, that worked because Edge was a young and up and coming guy who was, this is my hero, Hulk Hogan, and we're out here doing our thing. But in the days when Jimmy was should have, maybe could have, almost was on top, and then Hulk, like I don't know that works, and it
I'm
probably does
just
come
oh,
a little bit down.
I'm just thinking of the crowd reaction, especially Madison Square Garden, with the
Yeah,
energy that Hogan and Snuka could potentially bring to the ring.
yeah.
But then conversely, on the other side, all of the heat that Piper and Gilbert could have generated in a Madison Square Garden, in the, you
Oh
know,
yeah, for a
uh,
one-off, it would have probably blown the roof off the place. It would
right,
depend on how they gelled, how they worked together.
right,
It's because again, it's everybody's out telling their stories now, but it depends on who wants to work with who, and obviously Piper and Snuka had a ton of chemistry to work together. They did for years, and it was a red hot money made when guys individuals were actually responsible in part for drawing the house and drawing the viewership. It wasn't the three letters at that point, hadn't been rebranded. And Hulk was obviously the guy. When you put Hulk Hogan on the card, didn't matter if you put Howard's roast beef wrestling up on the on the marquee. They were coming, right. That's changed. That's the complete opposite now. Like, it doesn't matter. Sadly, I don't think the name matters at all now. I think it's because it's WWE. They've really by design turned that around. But as we talked about before, the dangerous thing with that is that's got a time clock on it. Because if they're not producing after a while, then they've got to create. They can't keep that facade up without the star, but they don't want the star to become bigger than the promotion. Which
right,
I get that, but they also need to make a star, right? Which they've done a really good job of keeping the stars right where they want them.
right,
Until it's time to put them into Hollywood in some B movies, hoping they blow up, and then what ends up happening though, and it's happened twice with Batista and The Rock, they don't really do much for WWE, except pop a rating or two when they come back. It's not like they're dragging WWE into Hollywood with them. Yeah, we've seen that for years, what I mean, with Hulk and Roddy and things like that. I think that they went on to have successful movie careers, and it doesn't necessarily mean that makes WWE more popular. You know what I mean? It just means they use WWE as a
right.
catalyst to get there. So they've kept stars, and I think by design recently at a certain level. Like, it's so and so, but it's WWE you're coming to see. Don't forget that. That's a subliminal message. Where it used to be like, okay, WWF is promoting this, but we've got Hulk Hogan. You know, um,
Right.
I think energy wise, that sounds really good on paper. Something doesn't sit well with me on that, and it's not really it's not the Piper Eddie side of that. It's I don't know that I hate to say it. I don't know that Hogan's willing to give up part of that pop to Snuka. I don't know, but that's just my gut. You know, I feel like something would have gone awry in that the crowd would have kind of turned on it. But I don't know. I could be wrong. Well, yeah, I'm jaded.
So, mid '80s. Again, a little bit before the national expansion. Because this team got together in 1982.
Okay.
Ran for about 9 years together, 8, 9 years together. And, a couple reunions here and there during the 90s. But the Fabulous Ones,
Yeah.
I mean, how do they fare? Because they've never been they've never been together, in the WWF.
Yeah,
Could
that's
they?
another team that could have easily been right there, in a red hot tag team scene. And considering the era where I prefer it like this, but you had real three titles, which is good. Maybe you make a case for a fourth, another mid card title, but you had three titles, which is all you really need. And they could have had a nice solid run at some point. I mean, I don't see any reason why not. They had a look. They were exciting, great babyface team, kind of in the vein of not necessarily stylistically, but in the vein of a Strike Force type of two really, hot baby faces could have just made a really good run. And I mean, at the very least, they're just going to add to the scene. They're going to be a legitimate contender to any real heel tag team. I don't see them really working well as heels there. I think they'd be. I don't know that they did anyway, but maybe so. But I don't think so. Um, but you know, I mean, two guys that later did make it there, the Fabulous Ones. They ran as heels. Steve Karen was successful there for years. Stan Lane had a short run I think as broadcaster and as a wrestler. Well,
Yeah, just Brock. Yeah, a short time
yeah,
as a wrestler, and then a broadcaster slash interviewer.
yeah,
Because at that point, I think he thought his career was either winding down or over, his in ring career, I should say.
yeah.
And he wasn't bad. I mean, I thought he did a really good job at it.
Hmm.
But it would have been interesting to see what would have happened. But not one other, but another, I want to say caveat, maybe we go down or another tunnel, in this rabbit hole. Um, it's 1996. All right. And, we'll actually stick with WCW. And of course, that's when, Hogan joins the NWO.
Hmm.
If it wasn't Hogan, now last week we talked if it wasn't Vince going
Yeah,
national, who would have? If it wasn't Hogan that joins the NWO, who else could have been? And we can have them jump from, WWF into
hmm.
WCW to join the NWO. I mean, who would have been that third person with, Hall and Nash?
I mean, what if it was Michaels? I think the
I was just
obvious
going to
is.
say, what if Shawn Michaels
I
jumps
mean,
over? I mean, does that
you got a
the click is
major
back
coup.
together?
I mean, major stuff. I think the only person that would have had the impact that Hogan did might have been Michaels. I mean, other than that perennial babyface Sting going at that time, because remember that's before the
Right.
long hair, that's before the crow,
Yes.
character persona. Jeez, that's before he got adopted that persona and eventually became. I mean, that was probably one of the worst wasted things they did with a faction. You keep it at 3 people. You don't need to keep adding to them. But that's the greed of wrestling, though, man. Is you see something works, and then they'll just jump on it and they'll keep. I mean, literally, the joke is now, like, I think that whole roster at some point was part of the NWO. It was ridiculous.
Yeah,
Like,
there isn't
it was
anybody
close
that's
to
not in
it.
the
Yeah,
NWO.
yeah. I think
I think
everybody
they
but our
should
boy
put it at 3.
Stro. Everybody but our
Yeah,
Stro and Lance Storm, I think, we're no, I'm
right.
just kidding. But yeah,
But I
it
think
got
they keep it at
stupid.
3. And then
Yeah.
you really have, 3, even if it's Michaels, let's say it's Hall Nash and Michaels back together again. They run roughshod over, the NWO, I mean, the WCW for, you could probably do it for about 2 years, on and off, not consistently, because I mean, it's eventually the roster is going to, common sense would be, listen, these guys are beating up everybody.
Mm.
There's more of us than them. Why don't we just gang up on them? Which would, kind of squash the story for a little bit.
Yeah.
They can sit out TV for a little bit, and then slowly make their way back, and it kind of
That's the
reignites again.
problem when you book it. And I don't know that they did, but I guess they kind of tried. But it's kind of some of the failed factions in WWF/WWE in the early 2000s, late 90s was the Horsemen worked because they would align with other bad guys when they needed to. So it wasn't just
Right.
4 guys trying to take on a roster, especially in the more realistic days, mid to late 80s. So, and yeah, I know they switched some guys in and out, and some guys worked better than not. But even after a while, that got really tainted. And that's at one point, I'm like, this isn't even the 4 Horsemen. I mean, it's at one point, Flair was the only real member of the 4 Horsemen. It's like, as good as some of the guys were, and as big as some of them were, they didn't really make good additions, in my opinion. But see, again, somebody trying to run with, and probably the same faction or same group of people with WCW were trying to run with something that had been successful, and they milk it to death. But yeah, I think if you run with just 3 guys in the NWO, then they could make uneasy alliances with other heels and stretch that thing out as long as it needs to go until this is where the crowd would dictate. This is a great example where a crowd would dictate until the crowd starts to maybe they are getting more cheers. Maybe it is time to change on babyface. That's where you let the crowd dictate. I think that certain guys, even at high levels, think that it means, oh my God, they booed my armbar. Must mean now I got to go 150,000 miles an hour. Doesn't mean that. Matter of fact,
No.
it's the exact opposite. Or they think that, well, this side of the crowd wants to cheer me, this wants to boo me, so I'll let them just both. No, you pick a side. Who's louder? And then you make the directional change. That's how you let the crowd lead you. So I don't want to, think that the crowd has no say because they buy money or they buy the tickets, but it's akin to a movie. If the movie's already made, I can't go to the theater and scream at the director to change what happened. I can choose not to go back and watch it again. I can choose not to go to the sequel. I can choose not to tell my buddy to go watch it. But when guys think that they need to, and there are exceptions, yes, I know. Oh, but Hot Rock and Hogan, and it was brilliant, and they switched it. Okay, 2 things. It was Rock and Hogan. They weren't going to catch any shit from the back for that because it's Rock and Hogan. Let me and
Right.
somebody else do that, we're fired. Period. End of story. Doesn't matter why we did it. There's a laid out plan. I'm not going to call it a script, but there is a plan. It's like an actor that can ad lib, but Robert Downey Jr. famously came up with "I am Iron Man." That's great, but if he went "I am Captain America," they're changing that, they're reshooting that shit, and it's not getting put in. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can only ad lib so much before you go against what the director wants. So I think there's this big misunderstandings, particularly from shit. It's not even the fans; it's a lot of the boys that think, well, that's what the fans want, so I'm going to give it to them. Yes and no.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of, I watch a
You
lot of,
follow the
listen to, I gotta,
trend, but you
yes.
don't
I,
jump on it right away. And again, it was so obvious with Hulk and Hogan. They weren't polarizing. The word pulling people apart. There wasn't one side chant for Hogan and one side chant. They were clearly had made their choice. They turned
Yeah.
on The Rock, right? I use Cena as the example because I know he thinks that that's awesome, and you can't polarize one side of the crowd against the other for 20 years. Then you get what happened, a heel turn that didn't work. Why didn't it work? The real reason it didn't work is because he wasn't fact straight up over enough as a babyface.
Right.
People thought they
You know,
wanted to turn. I heard people tell me this. I thought I wanted to see him turn. But when he did, I kind of liked him better, but then I didn't. Right. Because there's a psychological reason that you didn't. There's also a
right.
psychological reason that when Hogan, the babyface for almost 20 years at that point, I think it was. No, about 10. 10, I'm wrong. Was it 10 when he switched to Hollywood? Anyway, super long period of
Yeah.
time that he's an absolute, no questions asked, king of the mountain babyface who started to cool off a little bit. He needed something. He's very smart. He knew
Right.
that.
Yeah.
I don't know the details behind that, but I'm sure nobody had to twist his arm to do that. It's time. And guys with good
Right.
instincts know when it's time. That's when you let the crowd make the decision. They made that decision. But what they didn't do was they didn't boo him one night and Hulk all of a sudden runs to the back and then he's like, oh my God, I gotta go heel. What am I gonna do? It's not how it happened. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No, and it's funny, you talk about, The Rock and Hogan ad-libbing that. I I was listening to YouTube video, I don't know, probably last week, on lines that became iconic,
Mm-hmm.
with movies, and of course, Roy Scheider saying, "Oh, you're going to need a bigger boat."
I
That was
love
not
that.
that was not scripted.
Yeah,
That was not a scripted um line in the movie. He came up
I
that, and
heard
it was
that.
really an inside joke on how the production crew found the boat, but it was too small.
Yeah,
Um, so they it was a running joke, and Roy said it on
yeah.
film, and it's funny because you gotta, and it's the same with wrestling. You excuse me, as a director of the film, you have to know enough to when to listen to the actor and say, okay, leave that, print that. The
Mhm.
same way, you got to be the producer or whatever they call them, the backstage agents. Um, okay, yeah, well, the Rock turned, or so and so turned, yeah, because did you hear the crowd out there? And we're going to stick with that, and we're going to make changes.
Yeah,
Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth was not a scripted line in A Few Good Men.
I
He
know
came
that.
up
Yeah, I
with
did
that
know that.
on
Yep.
his own. But does that? No other line works. When especially with how he delivered it. To Tom Cruise. He's like, I want the truth, and he's like, you can't handle it. That was like oh my gosh, like, stop the movie. Some shit just went down, and
Yeah,
it's getting real.
you built the emotion so high there, or they did, as playing off of each other on the scene, and that's what I'm saying. Like
Right,
any good director, writer is going to look at that and be like, "There, we just made magic. We're keeping that." That's what I
right,
watched for so many years with working with Jim Kettner and ECWA. Is he always had a vision. But man, when the boys made magic, he was like, "That's what I'm talking about." Like, you know what I mean? Like,
right,
there were times that he would write things and he'd bounce it off all the guys. Like, we've had guys on, everybody talks about it. Yeah, he'd always bounce ideas off of us. He would bounce ideas off me and be like, that sounds great. And he's like, yeah, on paper, but I don't know. Let me call you back. And then he would call back and he would be, I got it. Okay, this is what needs to go down. And then you let the guys know and you let us know, and it's off to us to make a little magic to ad lib. It wasn't like you have to do this, and this, and then this, and this. And it was like, here's the vision, I'm gonna, whatever it is. Um,
right.
then I went through a whole series, a whole storyline with a series of angles where we just started losing things. We were living the high life at the chick magnets, and all of a sudden you're losing things, And it got to the point where he says, we get there, well, what are we going to lose this month? Because we're doing this, stretching this thing out. I don't know. And then, um, well, Mozart, why don't you lose your piano? And I was like, that's cool, but I don't own one. Well, the venue has one. Okay, cool. So we had the tax man come and take it. Well, I was loving this idea. So when they came to take the piano away, that the movers came. I forget who were we used some guy, maybe not any of the wrestlers because they were so known. Somebody came and moved the piano. I don't remember who it was, but as they were moving, I fainted. I'm like, what would I do if that was my piano and somebody was pulling it out? But that was never anything. Okay, when they move it, you're going to faint. When they do that,
Right.
he just said, give me a reaction. And he walked away. He walked away. He didn't watch us shoot vignettes. We had the cameraman, the guys involved, and the direction. That's where you make the magic. Like the guys when you listen to the more I listen to actors talk and listen to like musicians in the studio where I didn't like that guitar tone, so we doubled it up with an organ, and now you have this iconic riff that happened to a Journey song. Any Way You Want It was the guitar line was doubled, I believe, some type of organ. It was I don't know if it was a synth or keyboard or what, but anyway, so there was something about the sound that didn't come out right, and then the song's a huge hit. It's one of their biggest hits, all these lines we just talked about that became iconic in the movies. If you let wrestling develop like that and take your chokehold off of it, then you get what we're talking about. You could move a star into a different persona. And if they're a star, they're going to be a star, right? A lot of these guys, RJD, or RDJ, Robert Downey Jr., he's going to be a star in any movie he's in. He didn't need the Avengers, right? Just to be a star.
Right.
That's
Right.
how a lot of the actors are. So if you move some of the wrestlers out of their element that we saw them famous in, and you say, okay, I'm going to put them in this role, they're probably going to be pretty successful at it if the chokehold's taken off, whatever that role is. Like we said, if it's a Brad Armstrong, he said, well, Brad, I don't ever maybe see you wearing the top title, but you're going to feature prominently in making some of our top guys look great, and you're probably going to get a run at that Intercontinental title at some point. What do you think? Hey, man, sounds good to me. What's my paycheck going to look like? You know what I mean?
Right.
And guys did want to make it to the top for the most part because that's where the money was, obviously. But there's also that other strategy, like you said. What if you're an enhancement talent? You can just make a really nice living, just flying under the radar and making guys look great. Like there's nothing wrong with that either. It's kind of like what you choose, what you're best at, and what you choose to do. So if we
Right.
put Sting somewhere at a certain point in time, it's going to be based on what they ask of him and how he wants to play it out.
Right.
So it's
Right.
an interesting topic, though, man. I tell you.
It is, and as we fill this rabbit hole in, it seems like we've kind of come full circle, almost really back where we started from.
We're good at
Tonight,
that.
which is unusual.
Sometimes,
that we've talked ourselves into a circle. Not that happens each
dude.
and every week, but
That's what we do, though. If you
yeah,
look at our group
this has
text, we're
been
kind of
great.
like, we do the same thing, and it's like, hey, that's what we were talking about 3 hours ago. Cool, I'm good.
Well, it's funny because I introduce you on this show and the other show and I always ask you what's going on. Like I don't already know. Like we didn't literally talk 2
It's
minutes or
Wrestling
letting
101 now.
Yeah. With this countdown, it's literally it's ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to pull the curtain back just a teeny bit. It's 5 seconds from the time I hit record to the time we go live. So literally, I talked to Mozart 5 seconds before I asked him how he was doing. So I was full aware. I knew how he was doing, but it's for your benefit.
We have an
that.
audience. We have an audience
Right.
that doesn't know. So it's always
Right.
a valid question. You know what I mean?
Yes, and it's
But
always
what
a
they
good
do
way
know about
to
us now is that we're cantankerous dudes that just like to light the fire under everything. It's not complaining when you got an answer for it, because I got an answer for everything. So
right. And it's not, and we're not necessarily complaining, about the product, although it may sound like
yeah,
that. Maybe sometimes, and maybe we are, but we're venting because we know, and I know from watching it, for literally almost 5 decades, and Mozart being in and around it, for 2.5 decades, plus watching it, we know how good it can be, and it's just not there.
I
It's
thought
fallen
that
way,
I
way
knew how
short.
to do it. You know, Howard, I thought that I knew how to do it when I started learning. I'm like, I know how to do this now because now I know what I watched. But you never really stop learning stuff. That's why when I hear some of the
Right,
comments I hear, like people out in the media talking about why this didn't work and that didn't work, and I'm talking about top names. I'm like, that's not why. And if you think that, then you didn't learn much at all. Being where you were at and being the money you make. Because again, what I'll kind of I'll end the night on this note is just because you're on TV with a big money contract doesn't mean you're any better than some guy working on the independent show. It means you were right place,
right.
right time. You got a break. And just because you're down at the independent show at the local armory, high school, like church, doesn't mean you're not as good as some of the guys on TV. There used to be a time when you could say, "Yeah, they're on TV for a reason," and some people still are. It's not, there's some truth in that. But I think too many times now we have to keep, as fans and as wrestlers on the inside, we have to realize that it's not always about, oh my God, they're so talented and that's why they're there. It's a
Right.
big pack. Like I told you, it's the look, it's timing, it's what role do they need to fill? Is there a role right now for a 50-some-year-old dude with a cool white beard, and a bow tie? I don't see a role for that on TV. So why would I ever get hired? Nor do I want to be there, to be quite honest with you. But I would like that kind of money. Let's just be clear. But I don't want to be there making it. You know what I mean? Um,
Right.
but when we make our millions, when we are absolute, when we're up there with Rogan and Sean Ryan's show in terms of podcast views, and we're the wrestling podcast and we got the millions, maybe then would I consider opening a promotion with Howard's share of the money, and
There
and
you go.
and see what and
There
see
we go.
exactly if. I mean, I've seen it work. I mean, I worked with, again, Howard. I worked under Jim Kettner for a decade, and I've been friends with him for 3 almost now. Uh, you see a guy like that who can promote on the independent level, and just it's not overly difficult. Just know what your crowd wants, and you don't tell them what they want. Let them tell you what you want. You craft the story, and if it's not working, you learn from it. That's how you let the
Right.
crowd dictate. It's not, Jim never ran into the back all frantic because a match didn't get the reaction, or an angle, or a whole storyline didn't get the reaction. He pivoted, he moved on, he rewrote, he repositioned, he
And
let the
nobody knew any
crowd
different.
dictate, and nobody knew any different, right? And all the good bookers do that. The guys he learned from, sitting in court and sitting backstage in locker room areas with Ernie Ladd and the Grand Wizard and Arnie Scallon and things like that. When you listen to them, you know, as he did coming up, and they're playing chess and they're doing all this other real life stuff, but you know, they're playing chess, but they're also playing chess with the booking strategies too. You're going to lose some, you're going to win
Right.
some. I just think that we as a business, Howard, the fans are going to speak, but they can't dictate it to the micro level. They can dictate it on the macro level, the big picture,
Right.
where you're going to pivot to, but they can't dictate what move you're going to next, what move you're going to do, how you're going to do it, who it's going to be under the hood. That's the latest one. Like it's like it can be any fucking body they want until it's who they've planned it to be. Period. You know.
Right. And they
So,
can change it 20 times between now and then.
well, they did
That's
that, and
all.
everybody's like,
Yes.
we'll cut this around, but they did. Have you seen the whole thing now? Is like, well, it's
Yeah.
not the same
Yep.
guy, and of course it's a different. Come on, dude. They're not going to risk blowing who it really is by bringing them to the arena. Because again, like did you say it on the air? Like, if you want a wrestler, if you want somebody to know something, tell a friend, telegraph and tell a
Yep.
wrestler. They're not bringing anybody to
Yep.
that arena until they are ready to unveil who that is. And even then, they're probably
Right.
sitting in a private room sequestered,
Yes. Absolutely. But Mozart, it's been fun as usual. And listen, those that will be watching this whenever it drops, Thursday or Friday. Right now it's Tuesday night, about 20 minutes to 9. But by the
Past
time
Howard's
producer Steve
bedtime.
gets done, yes, it is almost very much past my bedtime. But leave a comment, tell us what you think. Whether you like it, you don't like it, things we did right, things we did wrong, things we got right, things we're way off on. We want to hear from you. We definitely want you to watch and listen to the other podcasts on the Lariat Podcast Network with Steve's. I still call it a Lariat. They just launched a new show called You Heard It Here Worst, I believe, which is supposedly nonsense. I mean, Mozart, we got to step up our game because You Heard It Here Worst is supposed to have more nonsense than us, and I can't have that. I can't have another show with more nonsense.
We're the
than
kings
us.
of nonsense. I mean,
Right? You can't. I just can't. But guys, until next week, I'll end it the same way I ended it last week. Keep your boots laced, your promo tight, and your finish protected.
Always.
Guys, everybody have a great night.
Take care.